Now, this particular question is pertaining to the moderate phase of Indian National Congress. Let's read the question, students, first of all. So, it is saying that to what extent did the role of moderates prepare a base for a wider freedom movement? Comment. Now, herein, students, let's start with the directive. Now, the directive given here, students, is comment. Now, comment, unlike the other directives, is a little bit special. Why? Because in the comment directive, we have to insert our own opinion, whether the moderate phase or the moderates were actually able to create a wider base or not. Now herein, students, my suggestion to all of you will be that whenever we are inserting our own personal opinions, they should be positive or neutral in nature, and we will restrain ourselves from making any political comment. Apart from that, students, when we talk about the keywords here in this particular question, the keywords are the role of moderates in the freedom movement. That's it. So, explaining the role of moderates in the freedom movement. So these are the two keywords that we have as a part of this question, and the directive is comment. So we have to take care of the fact that we will be inserting our own opinion. Now herein, students, first of all, we know that in 1885, the Indian National Congress was started by A.O. Hume with the help of certain Indian nationalists. As a part of the, students, the initial phase of the Indian National Congress, that is from 1885 to 1905, it was dominated by a category of people who were known as moderates. So, as a part of the, students, in our introduction, we can simply start by explaining that who were the moderates and what did they stand for. Now, when we come towards our body, we will simply start pointing out all the things that were done by the moderates in order to support the causes of Indian people in front of Britishers. At the same time, students, we are also going to talk about the methods that they used to achieve the political gains. Once we are done with these two parts, our body will be complete, and then in the conclusion, we will give certain positive and negative points regarding the moderates and whether they were actually able to contribute towards the involving of masses for the freedom movement. So this is a very direct and easy question. So we will directly proceed towards our introduction. Now, as I had told you, students, in our introduction, we can start by simply defining that who were the moderates. Now, the moderate, students, as we can see here, dominated the Indian national freedom movement during the period between 1885 to 1905. So, I had told you that the Indian National Congress was formulated in 1885, and in 1905, we have the partition of Bengal. And at this point of time, we see the rise of extremists. And that is why the period between 1805 to 1905 was dominated by the moderates. Apart from the, students, I had told you that within the introduction, we also need to talk about the ideology of the moderates and the methods they used to achieve political gains. As a part of the, students, we can say that these moderates believed in liberalism and adopted a moderate approach towards politics, such as signing resolutions, petitions, persuading the Britishers with respect to any particular cause they wanted to be highlighted. Apart from that, students, within the introduction, you can also give names of some moderates, such as we have Debendranath Tagore. You can take the name of Dadabhai Naoroji. So with this students, you can take names of one or two important moderates that were involved in this process of carrying out the work of Indian National Congress. And with respect to their approach, students, you have to highlight within the introduction itself that they believed in the moderate politics and wanted to achieve their political gains by means of quietly and peacefully persuading the Britishers. Okay. Moving on, students, when we talk about the body, we simply jump to the important role that was played by the moderates in widening the base of Indian freedom movement. In that, students, you will specifically talk about the ideas that were highlighted by these moderates and any important policies that were achieved by them. So we can start first of all, students, with one of the most important theory that was highlighted by the moderates, which informed the Indian masses about the policies of Britishers. In that, students, we have the economic critique of British imperialism, and this theory was very much popularized by the moderate politician, that is Dadabhai Naoroji. So students, Dadabhai Naoroji had proposed a very famous theory which is known as the drain of wealth theory, wherein he was specifically talking that how the Britishers were earning money in India and taking it back to their own home country, thus making the economic condition of our country very pitiable. So this is one idea that was highlighted by the moderates that informed the masses of our country with respect to the British rule in India. Apart from that, students, as a part of this, they started demanding certain things from the Britishers for more flexibility and more freedom in our own country. Now herein, the first demand that was highlighted by the moderates was the demand for economic reforms. Herein, students, the moderates such as Dadabhai Naoroji, Devendranath Tagore, etc. demanded the abolition of salt tax, which had happened very late during the time of Gandhi. Apart from that, students, they spoke about the reduction of military expenditure and reduction in land revenue, because all the profit that was gained by all these things was taken back by Britishers to their own home country, and we on the other hand were being exploited continuously. Apart from that, students, the moderates also demanded constitutional reforms. So basically, these early nationalists wanted the Indians to participate in the councils and also have a certain degree of control over their own country's budget. You can see that how the Britishers have completely taken up over our administration in the manner wherein we ourselves were not included on the fact that how we should be administered. So these were some basic reforms that were highlighted by the early nationalists. Also, students, the moderates highlighted the concept of self-governance. Now herein, they wanted to achieve democratic self-government as a part of this, wherein during the Indian Councils Act of 1892, they wanted that the scope of political participation for Indians should be expanded, and this was ultimately achieved by them as a part of this particular act. However, students, you can see that this particular participation was very restrictive and did not actually give us a lot of representation. Apart from this, students, the moderates also spoke about the protection of civil rights of Indians. So herein, students, the moderates were demanding basic rights such as the right to speech, thought and association, and a free press from the Britishers. We all know, students, that certain draconian laws were time and again imposed on us as a part of British rule. We had the very repressive Vernacular Press Act, wherein we could not talk ill about the Britishers. In fact, the right of habeas corpus was taken by us, and if the Britishers felt that somebody was trying to say something against them, they were charged on the basis of sedition, and without even trial, they were taken as a part of judicial custody. So these kind of points were highlighted by moderates, telling the Britishers that we need these basic fundamental rights to speak, to associate, to write whatever we want to in the press. Apart from the students, certain administrative reforms were also envisaged by the moderates, wherein First of all, they advocated the Indianization of government and the Indian civil services. They also wanted the separation of judicial from the executive functions. So basically, students, you can see that at this point of time, most of the civil servants were Britishers. The exam was also taken back in Britain, in London. And this was very repressive for the Indians as they themselves could not participate in their own country's civil services. So the Indianization of this particular exam was demanded by the moderates, and they also wanted the government to separate the major functions of judiciary and executive from each other. Apart from the students, the moderates were successful in creating a ideological groundwork. How? So basically, they provided an ideological base for the growth of freedom movement and set the ground for the rise of Gandhian phase in the Indian national movement. We can see, students, from the previous slide and this slide itself that the demands that were highlighted by moderates kind of made the masses aware that these are our basic rights. We should not be exploited economically. If we are earning for our country, why are the profits going back to Britain? Apart from that, they were also yearning for the fact that we want to say whatever we want to say, we want to write whatever we want to write, we want to associate with the organizations which are talking about the ills of British administration. So these basic rights prepared the ideology of the masses. However, students, there were certain setbacks or limitations of the moderates, which we have to highlight as a second part of our answer. So herein, students, what were the limitations? First of all, there was limited participation. Now, students, in the initial times of the introduction of Indian National Congress, it was majorly restricted towards the Indian intelligentsia. That is, most of the people who were participating in the meetings of Indian National Congress were learned men, and they were not actually really highlighting the plight of the masses such as the workers or the peasants. And because of this, there was limited participation and not many people were influenced by their ideas. Apart from that, students, we had seen that their method of struggle to achieve any political gain was very moderate. Their political ideology was based on petitions, prayers, and basic protests, and these were inefficient against the Britishers time and again, which again made the masses very irritated, and they started getting disillusioned from the idea of the moderates' leadership. Apart from that, students, one thing that is very much clear is that the moderates supported the British. They look up to the British and they did not want to fight them. They did not see, despite all these ills that they were highlighting, they were kind of fond of the Britishers and wanted to cooperate with them instead of actually protesting against the ills that they were imposing on our society. So as a part of the students, they failed to recognize the true nature of the British rule and did not see any alternative to it, rather to support it, which again disillusioned the masses with respect to their style of politics. As already spoken, limited participation that was restricted to only elite classes, wherein all these moderate students came mainly from upper middle classes and the zamindar class, who were not very interested in actually highlighting the problems of the peasants and the working class. Now, because of that, the participation did not spread all across the country, and this was only done later by Mahatma Gandhi, who was successful in understanding the problems of each and every section of the society. So from these two slides, students, you can easily see that although there were certain political achievements, certain ideological changes that were done by the moderates with respect to the Indian style of politics, yet the methods, the procedures they adopted to achieve any political gain were very ineffective to the deaf ears of the Britishers, which soon made the masses disillusioned with their ideas of conducting politics. Also, they were very fond of Britishers. They kind of supported them, which was not liked by the masses at all. Hence, students, by highlighting both the positive and negative points, we finally arrive to our conclusion, wherein first of all, we'll talk about the positives. That is, the moderates were able to provide political education amongst Indians and set forth a movement in motion, which ultimately, with the efforts of extremists, revolutionaries, and later Mahatma Gandhi, culminated into Indian independence almost a century later. However, students, you have to highlight the negative aspect as well, that their reach was restrictive, their approach was mild, and they were fond of Britishers, because of which they disillusioned the masses, and ultimately during the partition of Bengal in 1905, they were taken over by the extremists within the Indian National Congress. I hope you have clearly understood that when the directive is comment, how do we need to incorporate our opinions, which is mild in nature, it's either positive or neutral as a part of its conclusion.
Amrita IAS Academy.